We're good.
So I have my yarmulke, my kippah.
Yeah.
Here's my Nigerian hat.
Oh, I
Very
like it.
nice.
Yeah, you like it. Just
Yeah.
got this one. And
Pastor Billy, please. Hi, this is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends a second time because I did a little screw up, but it happens with everyone. And that's part of going with the flow, which we are talking about today. I hope I wished everyone a wonderful morning, an excellent afternoon, and an awesome evening. We are talking about the flow. We are here now. I am hoping I'm going to check it in a moment. And I want to welcome my wonderful panel. Pastor Billy, we haven't seen him because he's been in Nigeria. We have Jeff Keni Pulver here. Haven't seen him for a while, but he showed up and we've had him a few weeks in a row. We have Dr. Michelle, who started with a great story, and I had to stop her because we were in the wrong area. And we have Shivali here. And I am so happy because we're going to talk about going with the flow. Mistakes happen, changes happen, and things happen that we don't expect. And if we resist that flow instead of going with it and making the changes we need, we become very angry and very upset. But there's no reason for that. We can just stop, take a deep breath, and start again. Dr. Michelle, please, you were telling a great story.
Well, for those who are just joining us right now, I'm going to say a little bit of the story again, or the reason behind it, which is the idea that when you go with the flow, it doesn't mean that you just let go completely. And if you're flowing down a river, that you allow yourself to bounce off of boulders and snags and rocks and debris, that you actually have arms and legs and you can facilitate your flow down the river, that you steer. And there is an old Sufi, that's a spiritual practice, a Sufi saying that says, trust in God, but tether your camel. Carla asked me for an example of how you may have to steer the course. And I was starting to tell the story of heading out to a spiritual retreat that I've been going to for the last 38 years. And I arrived there and find that half the community, and the community was very small this year, but half the community had come down with COVID. And the leadership was going with the flow, which meant they were not really taking an active role in limiting the spread of this virus. In fact, in the first 2 days that we were there, another person came down with the virus. And after we settled in, my husband and I checked out the Center for Disease Control for protocols. And we came up with a list. And in talking to a few other COVID-free members, we decided to address the board members who had taken over. In fact, our leader, our main teacher, had come down with COVID. So they were still having the workshops, but we didn't feel like they had very clear guidelines. So we asked if we could have a meeting. And first, the board members were sort of resistant. They wanted to go with the flow. So we insisted. We even didn't go to their workshops. And then in the evening, we tried again. And well, God had a different idea because he or she sent a thunderstorm and we couldn't even talk. So we had to wait a couple of more days. When we came back again as a group, 2 more people had COVID. So now people were taking notice. And we brought everybody together and started a discussion. And I volunteered to take notes. which enabled me to ask the vital questions, what areas we really needed to cover, like the use of bathrooms, like the use of the kitchen and how we get fed, and not only social distancing and using masks, but the people who were in the workshop room versus the people out on the porch who had COVID and were not wearing masks and breathing through the windows. So we adjusted all these. And then also, what do we do about the people who are coming? How do we, they may be on an airplane, they may be bringing COVID into the camp. How do we isolate them without making them feel imposed upon? So we came up with a list of protocols, got all the board members to approve it, and then we sent it out to each of the members in the community by email and posted it in the bathrooms. And then we sent it out to the people who were planning on coming or might be planning on coming in the future. And the goal was to be COVID-free in 10 days. And we were. And that's what I mean by steering around the obstacles instead of bashing yourself into them.
Great story. And I'm so happy you shared it with us. And I guess we'll need to do this part later. Jeff, you are very good about talking about going with the flow. And I was so happy to see that you would be here today because of that.
Well, I thank you, appreciate that. And I would just mention that I'm a very firm believer in nowism and living and being in the state of now, because now is all we have. And in fact, flow is very much part of that. But a few years ago, I saw a sign in a building before I walked into a meeting that said, "Only dead fish go with the flow." And after I stopped laughing, I realized, wait a second, that's a message. And that, if in fact I allow myself with purpose and intention to flow with the fish, okay. But I'm allowed to create my own flow. I'm allowed to create my own direction, put my wings out and fly where I want to, and create an airflow where others could follow if they want to. But I'm not obligated to follow the flow if it doesn't feel right. That I'm allowed to find that direction, look at my inner GPS, and look where I'm going and be aware of it. So because what I believe overrides that is being in the flow, the moment. That, look, all we ever have are the moments, right? Some moments may feel like they last forever. Some moments may just be moments in the transitory. We don't remember them, but it's the connection of the dots of the moments that bring our lives together, to provide the opportunity for us to have those memories, to have those experiences, and how we recollect those moments define everything. And from a relative perspective, we don't need too much to remind us that we're made of cosmic dust. And so there's a strength to stand up. And I'm not saying to resist the flow, I'm not at all. I'm just saying that don't be afraid to be who you are. Don't be afraid to share your voice. Don't be afraid to be you. Because the only person who can be you is in fact you. And that may alter the direction where your life's current is going. And you'll create a flutter and a flow to that. And that could be the most amazing thing. Also, as we go through this life here and we experience lessons, those lessons, the flow we carry reflects the lessons we've learned and the lessons we will learn. So don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to be. And perhaps don't be afraid to hold back. If you have something to say it. You can never tell someone you love them enough. You can never tell someone you appreciate them enough. You can never tell them, because frankly, when you're gone, then you miss that opportunity to tell someone you love them. More importantly, if you're in a relationship with somebody from far or near and don't speak, don't assume that the person is either empathic or intuitive and just understands without anything being spoken, that everything is totally, completely understood. Speak your mind when you can. You create a flow and an energy, a positive one that brings out light. And for me, I'm an advocate of living at a high vibration, helping others find their light, to share that vibration and to really stay in a high vibe state. I believe that if you find yourself walking down a street and strangers coming up to you and complimenting you or just wanting to open up and share with you, you're actually, don't be afraid. People are connecting with you because they see your light. And sometimes it's those little things that you do for others, unexpected, unasked for, help change and alter the shape of someone's life. And those moments are strung together and creates a flow that's unique to them, but it's part of your mission too. So as much as going with the flow is wonderful because you don't want to, ruffle someone's feathers, don't be afraid to stand up and be you. If you see something wrong and you know it and it's going to bother you, please don't live in regret. Live in the moment and be who you can be all the time. Easy to speak, very hard to do. But if you learn your flow and you connect to it, it's like being a professional musician. Sure, if you're on stage and you missed a lyric, the only person who probably will know is you. If you're out of key, okay, maybe people will hear that, but ultimately you're going to be your worst critic. So learn to let go of that. Don't interfere with your own flow. Don't stop, but flow with your flow, but under your direction if you want to be. And if you want to, quote, go with the flow, please feel free to do so too. It's up to you.
Well, can I ask you a question? Because you brought up something that I agree and I sort of don't agree with. If you are being yourself and you're not trying to be someone else, you're not trying to be Pastor Billy or Dr. Michelle or me, are you not going with the flow?
I don't, it really depends. I mean, first of all, I don't believe in trying. I believe in doing.
I use the word try, and usually I tell people not to use it, but with everything going on, the word came out.
No, and I understand the context and the softness of the implied use of the word. Last year I made it a point to drop the word try from my vocabulary. I almost succeeded in it. I find myself to this day using it occasionally, but I find myself, if I set a purpose for myself and I live that purpose and I follow the intention with it, I'm no longer trying and I am doing. And if I am doing something with intention, that is what I mean to do. And so if I come to a consensus with others, then I'm allowing my flow to interact and connect with others, and we maybe find something where we bring everything in common together. Just because I said yes doesn't mean I completely agree, but I'm not saying no. And if I'm following the leader, it's because it feels the right thing to do. And I'm not saying, by the way, that I'm completely independent, that I will always go my own way because that's the only way to do it. No, there are times when I will listen and I connect, I share and engage, and I make a determination what is best where I'm at that moment. But I leave myself the opportunity to change my path and to go in the direction that I feel the most attracted to at that time.
So if you're doing that, Jeff, are you not going with the flow that goes with yourself and who you are?
So being someone who's into radio and technology and stuff, there's a difference between direct current and alternating current. And I feel that it's really directed to that energy, because even asking this question or talking about going with the flow, at one moment by saying that only dead fish go with the flow, that kind of like stopped the flow and shifted, right? But that was my direction, and it was really like a direct path to follow. Alternating current, on the other hand, it's a different way of energy comes through. So I think it's possible that if we allow ourselves to be and not judge who we are, but to breathe and engage in what we'll call self-love, and at the same time self-determination, and allow that the energy that's around us to become part of those particles of the flow that we are. If others want to join us and you don't protect yourself from it, wonderful. If you have permission or wish to follow the flow in other directions, depending upon the circumstances, I think that's okay too. And I think that only when you look back in time will you truly understand where you went. Because when you're in the now, you sometimes lose the perspective of everything else, but the moment that you're in, you really understand where you went. Because when you're in the now. And so there's the challenge of being true to you, true to the mission, and true to everyone else who you're serving or helping to serve. And so there are perspectives, but I believe that if in your absolute heart, you're doing what you think is the right thing to do, you're following your flow, you're being in that moment, and you're not looking back, you're looking ahead.
maybe I'm not asking the question correctly. Pastor Billy, what do you want to say about the flow?
Yeah, I love being a part of these conversations on MindPlore. It just really rejuvenates my mind, and I'm excited to be here to hear from Carla, Shivali, Jeff, and Dr. Michelle. And I'm the flow. So for me, there's two kinds of flow. If I could bring that into the conversation, the flow is going with the flow of everyone else. All right. So there's, I guess I would call it the macro flow, right? That's kind of where everybody else is going. And there is a fear that if we go against the flow, then people will not like us. Okay. And that's why, in that context of the macro flow, I have an acronym I'd like to share with everybody today, and it's fear loses our will. Fear loses our will. FLOW. I just made that up. And what that means for me is that, okay, so here's the flow of where everybody else is going. And yet, if I make a decision, here's the micro flow to go against the flow, then I actually, and it's a fearful thing, right? I mean, when we go against the flow where everybody else is going, then there's fear. So that's why I say on the macro side, fear loses our will, FLOW. But yet I find joy when I do go against the flow. And, you know, that, if I may humbly say, that has to deal with my faith. So I'm a follower of Jesus Messiah, and Jesus Messiah here on earth went against the flow, right? So that's what I do. I go against the flow. And so we have to make a decision that if we're going to go against the flow, there may be fear, but because of his love, all that fear goes away. So I don't want to sermonize, bloviate, sermonate, but I am always going up against the flow, even as I just returned from the war zones of the world, particularly Nigeria. You know, I'm going against the flow when I'm in Nigeria because no Westerner wants to go to Nigeria. The US Embassy says, don't go there. So I think it's important. There are times when we go with the flow, and there are times when we go against the flow, and that takes a lot of wisdom, discernment, and discretion.
But isn't the flow, and maybe I got it a little clearer for me, the flow for you or for me or for anyone is going with what feels right inside. Jeff may disagree about something and say, no, I may tell Jeff not to do something. And he says, well, inside, I think it's right, and I'm going to go ahead and do it. That's what I mean by going with the flow. Inside, it may feel right for me, although the guys in DC are telling me, no, you shouldn't do this now. But I feel I need to do it. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about going with the flow. Mm-hmm. Is that a little clearer?
Yeah, well, I think it explains what you just said, Carla, and I'd love to hear what Shivali has to say. That, yeah, there's a macro flow and then there's a micro flow. Most of the time, you know, macro, we're going with the flow, but then there are times when we have to make a decision to go against the flow. And again, one of my heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King, I mean, he was totally against the flow. back in the 60s before he died. So just a thought.
But
And
Just want to add to what's being shared by Pastor Billy. I actually think that going against the flow is something which I've lived my life, but mostly from a technology perspective. I look for when in technology innovation, the work that I've contributed to helping change the way the world communicates, there are three words that come up in my mind: fear, greed, and disruption. And it's the entrepreneurs who have the strength and the ability to be fearless, to go up against, if you will, the flow of the incumbents and the flow of what they're used to stand up and do something different that will bring innovation and change. That's how things change. That's how the world evolves. That's how technology platforms come forward and how new companies are born, is because people who either don't know better or are just so driven, they will create a flow of their own and bringing hopefully great new technologies into this world because they see the opportunity to disrupt the flow that exists, and bring forward opportunities. And for me, it was a combination of legacy, way of doing things, old regulations, and new technologies being born, and then repurposing them in a way that had never been thought about before. So I kind of like that. Whether we're going from in a religious perspective, a technology perspective, and really a leadership perspective, flow has the pluses and the minuses depending upon where you are in that ecosystem. But ultimately, those who can control their flow and are aware of their flow are ones who will stand out above the rest, and both in a good and bad way. You could look at cult leaders as going against the flow and building cults behind them and being able to take advantage of people's emotions that way. And that's not necessarily a really good thing at all. But flow as itself, in the pure sense, and I'll keep the purity of it and keep the light side of it, I think that it represents some of the biggest opportunities in our lives to understand who we are and what we want to do and how we want to do it. Music naturally, if you go outside and listen to nature, the birds chirping, and even a rainstorm when the rain is coming down creates a flutter, creates an energy, creates a flow. Or if you just relax someplace, wherever you find that safe space to just reground yourself, is a flow. So I think there are many natural things you could do to connect. And then ultimately, the beautiful part here is that all 8 billion people here have a chance to figure out for themselves what signs for them will dictate the flow they want to follow and be.
so, going with the flow is, you're all talking about going with the flow as in the crowd, except for Dr. Michelle. I'm talking about going with the flow, with your own flow, what's going on inside of you. Shivali, do you want to say something?
Yes, thank you so much, Carla. Okay. Oh, there's so much to learn today. The way I'm connecting things, as I first listened to Dr. Michelle, she mentioned about that story that she narrated. What I could ultimately make out from that was that, okay, that group was undergoing the flow, or rather, the teacher, whoever was conducting the session, was going with the flow, and yet action had to be taken, and an appropriate action was taken, right? And this helped me to connect with what Jeff said about the dead fish. It talks about, once again, taking action. That means somehow it reminded me of free will. If I look at from the higher dimension, then to me it is like that eternal tussle between free will and what the divine has ordained for me and for the world around me. You may or may not believe in religion, you may or may not believe in God, but for me, going with the flow is that, yes, I accept things the way they are moving, but at the same time, God has given me free will also. So I will use my wisdom also. If certain things are not moving the way I feel it's correct, then I've been asked to take action, you know. And there's another thing which really struck me was what Jeff said about, we are cosmic particles, right? And I strongly believe we are co-creators. So when we are taking action, we have to ensure that it's divinely ordained. But how do we understand? We understand because when you're going with the flow, what happens is the challenges which come, of course, human life challenges will come. We are able to skirt through them, just as the river does. This is what I had mentioned last time. But if repeated obstacles are coming in the way of the way I'm doing things, then it should make me sit up and question myself that, am I really on the right path? Yes, of course, I should take action. I should exert my free will. I should be wise. And as Reverend pointed out a little earlier about Martin Luther King and many such revolutionaries who had to go against what the masses believed or, leading them in a different way, you know. So individual wisdom, individual perspective is important, but I believing in God also, I feel that ultimately I do what I'm supposed to do. I take action, but then I leave it to the higher dimension. The macrocosm, you want to call it, you want to call it the universal energy. So for me, when I am doing that which I'm meant to do, then everything falls in place. And that is how I go with the flow, with this belief.
Okay, guys, chime in.
Well, Shivali, I thought you made some really, really excellent points about checking in with yourself and sensing what it is, where you need to go. And then if you get a lot of obstacles, maybe questioning whether or not you actually are on the right path. And I think that is something that one of the biggest issues to going with the inner flow is that it's not like we're taught how to do that. We're really taught how to fit in. We're taught how to fulfill the expectations of other people. And so learning how to listen to that little voice inside is a journey, and recognizing what it's really saying, and sometimes not giving up too soon, because sometimes those obstacles are there to teach you important leadership skills or important awarenesses. So it is a dance. Life is a dance. And I loved what you brought up, because when do you question? And when you question, how do you question it? And it can be tricky, because sometimes just stopping and listening is something we don't even think we have the time to do. That's what I'm encouraging, is take time to listen. And I loved what you said about we're co-creators, because I've been working on this whole theory about we are creators, and that in order to flow, we have to create, that we don't just be human beings, but we create. And when we create, we access that divine part of ourselves that is the flow through us, and specifically through our own manifestation of that flow, checking in with the creativity. And creativity means taking time and not pushing. So that's the other part of the not flowing, is the pushing, is like, oh, I got to get all these, I got to do this publicity here and the social media there, and I have to make this program there, and push all the time, and don't take time to relax. Don't take time to meditate or to just muse. And what I've read and I experience is that it's very hard to be creative and inventive unless you do that you really take time out from, as I guess Pastor Billy said, from the macro flow. Now, I don't believe that there's a macro flow, but many individuals have kind of creating this force or stream that pulls us along, kind of like fish all going together, or birds, and it creates a force. And that's the macro, but it's just individuals each making their own choice and kind of getting pulled along.
I think what's important as well, to tag on with what Dr. Michelle and others have said, is that we have to have an anchor. We have to have absolutes. And then because we have absolutes, then those are the anchors, those are the cairns. Bring up a new word here, CAIRN. Those are the pile of stones. And in the Jewish tradition, they built cairns anytime they had a awesome, majestic intervention with God, with God. And so when we have those absolutes, those guide us to where we're not going to go off course, if I can say, and say, well, wait a minute. Okay, I have absolutes that I live by. And again, I'm directed by Master Jesus Messiah. And I don't want to stray from that. And then that allows me to decide, oh, okay, in this instance, do I go with the flow or do I go against the flow? And so just my idea about, okay, what are our anchors? What are our absolutes? What are the things that guide our lives? What are the things that never change, right? They never change. And some of us may have different absolutes, but that guides whether we go with the flow or we go against the flow.
So, Pastor Billy, can you give
Yes.
us some examples of your absolutes so that we can get a sense of what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I'll just use one, and it's related to here's an absolute: God is in control of my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What a crazy concept, right? God is in good. It's not really me, I have to listen to the God that I serve, the God of the Bible, revealed in Jesus Messiah. Again, I don't want to sermonate or pontificate or bloviate. There's nothing worse than an obnoxious pastor. Okay. And so that would be an absolute that, hey, I got to follow him, and I'm not really in control. I just have to, in that sense, I do have to go with the flow. So
Yes, I can relate to this very easily. And what Michelle said a little earlier when she was speaking, she said about, we really need to do that self, introspection. And this is something I learned in my own life, Yes, indeed, learning lessons. There was a time when, like from very young age, I was almost a rebel. I wanted to exert myself all the time, that it's me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But as I was growing up, what I felt also that at times, what I thought was going with the flow, that is exerting, taking action, was not necessarily the divine will. That is why probably the obstacles would come, I would learn, and it's not becoming unhappy. No, no way. Learning lessons and making myself better. And yes, what Pastor Willie had just now said, surrendering to the divine. Oh, this lesson I have learned, the hard way and still learning. Yes, of course, as I once again say, we are supposed to take action. God has given us free will. We are supposed to, He's given us that brain, the intelligence. I strongly believe in that. I believe in the mind power. But at the same time, when I become like a child and I say, no, I want this thing now and I want it my way, but the divine gives it to me at the divine timing only, then what is it that I'm talking about? That is the time I'm going with the flow. That yes, God, I've done my part, I've taken action, now I leave it to you. So this is the way I'm trying to kind of work on my life at this moment. So I think Michelle touched upon it very beautifully about that learning. Yes. So co-creation, surrendering to the divine will, That doesn't mean you don't take action. You do take action. You do exert yourself, but then you have to do the introspection also. So God has given us that thing. But at the same time, everything happens in divine timing. I strongly believe in this. And I've seen this happening in my life and the lives of people around. What if what I want now will come in a better shape, in a better form later? But yes, I've taken the action now. I have prepared myself for that destiny of mine because the opportunity is going to come. God is going to provide it for me. So this is the way I look at it.
Well, and I agree with you, Shivali, and that's what I wanted when I was putting this topic together. I was thinking about the flow for our inner selves. Whatever happens in the world happens in the world. We can't take control for that, but we can take control over what happens to our own thoughts, to what we want to do. And that's all we can take control of. So when I was talking about the flow, and I hope this makes it clearer to those who may not have understood, I was talking about your own inner flow, your own inner desire to do certain things. Like if inside you want to talk, you're thinking, oh, I want to talk to this friend, but something says, hold off for now. Is it better to hold off or is it better to make the call? In my mind, I'm learning it's better to hold off unless I feel the inner flow saying, go ahead, make the call, go ahead and move forward. Or it could be, I could fight it and decide to make the call, and that ends up being a negative thing for not only myself, but the person involved. So when I'm talking about the flow, I'm talking about the inner flow, not the flow of all the fish. Because believe me, all my life, I have never gone by the flow of the fish. I always got into trouble because I didn't always agree.
Right, but there's a challenge in the dichotomy of that, right? Because you have the inner flow, the individual flow, and then of course there's always going to be, depending upon who you are, there's going to be the vibrations of one or more others that you're dealing with, right? Because if you're in a family, the direction you take will influence the energy and flow of those who look up to you. And if you're a mom or a dad and you have kids, your kids' flow is going to be directed and be affected by you, even if you're encouraging them to be individuals and to make their own decisions. If you happen to be the CEO of a company and the company has its own flow because it does, and you're running a team, your flow as a team leader, whether you're CEO or head of a department, will have those effects. And if you're the president of a country, you may have personal intentions and personal goals, but you will set the policies for so many others to follow. And again, they're going to be looking to you both individually, collectively, and vibrationally to see what you really mean by what you say. And so there's, and if you have a congregation who's listening to you when you're instructing them to find themselves, they're still going to look to you and say, and look for what you are doing as a cue. Because one of the things we didn't speak about really are signs, celestial signs, or just energetic signs, or when the feathers appear, or when pennies appear, or whatever those, or the numbers 1111, or whatever your own feedback loops are, the signs that or if you hear music playing and it only comes at a certain moment because you feel connected, you feel a higher self coming through. So everyone individually has those, I believe, feedback loops. Well, we don't ever talk about that, but we know when we're divinely connecting at some level, and we have that dream or we have the conversation and we feel it. And so I think that individually, energetically, sure, there is the flow we have, the flow we rebel against, and the flow that empowers us to do and be who we are. And I think that when we allow ourselves to be who we are in the most natural state without making any excuses, by accepting you, accepting your friends for who they are, accepting yourself for who you are, you have the chance to be everything you ever could be. And not live in the regret and not regret things you didn't do, but really focus on what you want to do. And that's really from that, I believe, is a learned experience. Some people may naturally do it without ever thinking about it because they're gifted with that knowledge from the beginning. Others have to experience not necessarily wonderful experiences to learn a way that gives them that comfort. So I think that as much as we talk about the individual being in our own now, would be remiss not to at least say that our flow may interact. It's like if you're a magnet and you put up multiple magnets around, you will see the fields changing. The electricity is literally going to interact with multiple fields because we're all alive. And sometimes it creates, a North Pole and a North Magnet, they may repel each other, but North and South comes together. So there's a lot of energy there, and the potential is unbounded in terms of what we can do. And maybe it's just semantics, but I do think that understanding flow gives everyone a chance to better understand who they are, what they want, with the flexibility of changing your mind and becoming who you want to be differently a moment from now than the moment you were a moment ago, because that moment's already gone anyway. And we can dynamically learn and grow from that. And so we are unbounded individuals, but only when we recognize that we are, because you see, limitations come. When we allow others to tell us who we are, then we're bound by those limitations as long as we accept them. And I do hope that each and every one of you have the power and the flow to break through other people's expectations of yourself and allow you to be all you ever want to be.
Yeah. I let me say, may I say amen to that, Jeff?
Sure.
And there's a great verse from the teachings of Jesus where he says that I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And wow, I eat that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. So thank you for that reminder to all of us.
Well, I would like to add in here the not a caveat, but this awareness that actually we are born with that awareness, Jeff, that you were talking about, but that through childhood and our experiences at a time when we were very vulnerable and very dependent on other people, we learned, because we have to survive in these bodies, how to please other people so that we survive. And in that process, we fall asleep. We lose connection to that inner flow. And so a lot of our life is rediscovering, or as my teacher used to call it, waking up. That we are asleep in many ways, flowing with what we experience as the general flow, because we want to feel safe, we want to be accepted, we want to be loved. And to shift that takes practice. And to shift that takes training. And to shift that takes experience and awareness. And as I already said before, time out, when you actually can just muse and allow the creativity to flow through you. And another thing that my teacher used to say is go where the energy is. For me, that means when I'm doing something and I feel a lot of that resistance, and this speaks back to what you were saying, Shivali, that might be a sign that I need to change directions. If I change directions and suddenly I find things opening up, that for me is where the energy is. If other people are responding, and that's the other point I want to make, is that we don't live in a vacuum. We live with a lot of other human beings who are all vibrating at their own levels. And when we start to feel a connection and we feel that multiplication of energy, that's a good sign that maybe I'm going in the right direction.
Completely agree with you, Michelle. Yes, I agree. This is all I have to say at this time. I agree with you.
An agreement is important, but we also need to have our own thoughts. And I'm glad that everyone's saying, okay, I agree, I have nothing to say. But I really don't think that's really happening. I think we all use words in different ways, and the expression of everyone is very important. So sitting here and saying, oh yeah, I agree, that's great. But your expression of what you agree and how we use our words may hit one person one way and another person another way, or may not even go to anyone, to some people at all. So it's important for you guys to express what's going on in your mind when you're talking about the flow or anything. And having said that, I know that Dr. Michelle needs to leave soon. So do you have any last words you'd like to share?
That's a good question. Let me think a minute. Life is an adventure. Immerse yourself in it and enjoy it. And don't be too hard on yourself. And in the process, life is an experiment. You have to experiment to find out what is energy for you, what works for you, what your gifts are, and not get too caught up in the visions and beliefs of other people, to learn to listen to yourself. And this may be a lifetime journey. It may be a lifetime lesson, and that's okay.
It's perfectly okay. Because life is, we all walk a slightly different path, if not a big path. And because our paths are a little different, sharing our journey helps others decide how they want to walk. It helps me to listen to you guys.
I want to say one more thing, and that is that I heard once from a man who was in the process, he was a Buddhist and he was in the process of dying. And he said, we're really here to be of service to others. That yes, life is an adventure, but we're also here to be of service of others, to others. And this show is part of that service, that in sharing our ideas and in sharing our experiences, others may benefit from that and relate in terms of their own experiences.
And what you just said, I've heard said by different spiritual leaders through the world, that our thoughts and what we do are really not for us. There are gifts, but there are gifts to give away, not to keep to ourselves, but to share with others. So if you love singing and you sing in the shower every day, but you don't go out, and your voice is beautiful, everyone wants to hear it, they go near your shower every time you shower, why aren't you going out and singing with people? If you're an artist, yes?
I have to leave. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a pleasure to serve with all of you and to be here today. And thank you for all your words. But I got to go.
Do you have any words to leave us with?
Yes, please follow your flow. Be your flow and understand together we create a collective. Please be part of it. Thank you.
Okay. Remind me, I need to share something with you later. But thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Bye.
Pastor Billy, do you want to say something as we get on to ending this show?
Yeah. And thank you, Jeff and Shivali and Dr. Michelle and Carla. Yeah, my last word, God loves you and has a wonderful flow for your life. How's that? A wonderful plan for your life. God loves you.
Thank you. Amen.
Okay, Pastor Billy, don't leave too quickly. Shivali?
Yes, what I said a little earlier, that taking action, going with the flow is important, yes, But we should also see one thing, that this entire world, the way I have studied in my scriptures and the way I have experienced, is that we are not the controllers. I think there is a mention of this. We do not control things. We take action. We may not be successful all the time, but we are not the controllers. The problem lies when I want to control my life. I'm supposed to take action, but I have no control over things. I can do the best that I have, the best of abilities that I have, and I will do that. I will create that new world for myself. But at the same time, I have to always surrender to the divine will also. And everything is interconnected. That is what Jeff was also mentioning, and Michelle also mentioned, that everything is interconnected. So when we are going with the flow means there are others also who are going with their own individual flows also. That's how we speak of cosmic energy. That's how we speak of individual energy. And we are all co-creators over here, but we are not the controllers. So whenever we are striving for something in our life, or whatever we are doing, simple things in our day-to-day life, we need to understand one thing, that we need to surrender to the divine will. That is the true essence of going with the flow. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pastor Billy.
Yes.
Oh, did you talk, or is it Michelle?
I did. Yeah, I said God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life, a wonderful flow for your life.
Okay.
Can
And
I
I love
add just one more thing, which came to me while I was listening to Shivali, and that was having that experience of gratitude, that in accepting what God sends us, or the divine, to have that positive mindset of gratitude, that whatever comes, you may not know, it may not feel good in this moment, but chances are it's going to work out. And that's where you sort of trust the universe and find yourself learning that practice of gratitude, of seeing the silver lining in the clouds.
And that's very true, that life is a journey. And sometimes you hit a rock, and sometimes it's smooth, but that rock brings us to that smoothness. So if we don't hit that rock, we're going to miss something further down the road, or maybe even more rocks, really big rocks, if we don't accept and allow whatever happened to happen. And with that, we will be back next Tuesday for another MindPlore, and hopefully I'll get it right next week. Thank you so very much, Pastor Billy, Jeff, who left, Shivali, and Dr. Michelle. Have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Carla. Bye-bye.
Bye.